Okay, managerial accounting. This is lecture number 3 for chapter 22. This one is about direct labor variances. Um, it's on pages 1114 through 1117. Um, these are as usual, these are the headers that you're looking at. You're looking at the ebook. And at the end, we're going to look through the basic exercise problem 22-2. So direct labor variance, very similar to direct materials variance that we talked about in the last video. Um, we're looking to narrow down where the variance came from and why it happened. So I have a budgeted expectation, and I have a different amount that I actually spent versus what I anticipated spending. And we're looking at trying to figure out, why that happened and where that came from. So the first and foremost, the total direct labor variance. Sorry about that. I had to pause recording for just a second. The total direct labor variance we find by taking our actual minus our standard direct labor cost. So what our total actual cost would be found by taking our actual rate. So this would be rate per hour. Say it's $10 per hour is my anticipated rate, just as an example, times the actual time. So the actual number of hours worked. So if I anticipated there being 100 hours worked, then I take the $10 an hour times the 100 hours worked. So in the book, you see that we have our actual cost for direct labor in this case is $10 per hour and 38,050 hours. So that's $38,500 is our actual cost. The standard was $9 per hour and 4,000 hours. So we have $36,000 in total for our standard costing. Just like the direct materials variance, subtracting those two numbers finds my overall variance. So the difference is $2,500. But notice that just with this math here, that if I'm just using the total ones, if I'm just using the overall variance, I don't know whether that variance came from me paying my employees more than I anticipated, or if it came from my employees working more hours than I anticipated. And remember, these are all going to be adjusted based on quantity. Oops, I forgot to get rid of this from last video. Sorry. Okay. We're going to work on 22-2 later. Okay, so what I will do is I will break that out further. So I want to narrow down whether or not it is a rate issue or a time issue. Did I spend more hours than I anticipated based on volume? Everything will be based on volume. Or did I spend more per hour than I anticipated? The per hour one would be my direct labor rate variance. My direct labor rate variance will be my actual rate per hour minus my standard rate per hour times the actual hours. Okay, so in this case, the example we had here, the standard rate, I'm over on page 1115, the standard rate was $9, the actual rate was $10. You can see they take $10 minus 1, and then take it times the actual hours. Again, in this case, it's 3,850 to get an unfavorable variance of $3,850. The direct labor, the direct labor time variance, on the other hand, looks at whether we spent more hours than what we anticipated or not. So for that one, I'm going to take the actual direct labor hours minus my standard direct labor hours times my standard rate to find the difference. This one had a $1,350 favorable difference, which makes sense because I spent 150 less hours than what I anticipated. Again, as usual, when I net those two together, I would get that total variance of 2,500 unfavorable because I have more of an unfavorable variance than a favorable variance after I net those two. So actual hours will be whatever actual hours I spent. Actual rate will be whatever my actual amount per hour I paid my employees. My standard hours would be how many hours I believe I should have used based on the volume. So sometimes problems don't tell you the number of hours used. They'll simply say, I should use half an hour for every unit that I manufactured, and then they'll say I manufactured 10,000 units. Well, then I just take the half hour per unit and say that my standard hours then in total would be 5,000, right? 0.5 times 10,000. And then the standard rate, similarly, you know, whatever I believe I'm going to pay or what I budget to pay my employees on a per hour basis. So this is abbreviated functions here, formulas kind of make it a little easier. Okay, so Now I want to look at brief exercise 22-2 on page 1138 in your book. Yet again, I'd recommend going and trying this on your own first. So you can pause this video now, open up a spreadsheet, do it on paper, however you want to do it. We go work problem, basic exercise 22-2 on page 1138. And then I am going to work through it now. Okay, so basic exercise 22-2, Bellingham Company produces a product that requires 4 standard direct labor hours per unit. So direct labor hours per unit is 4. The standard direct labor hours per unit, okay, the standard variable overhead cost, oops, I was on the wrong problem, excuse me, per unit, and the standard hourly rate of $20 per hour. So standard rate, $20, oops, $20, and just to make sure we keep everything straight, I'm gonna say per hour. Okay, then goes on to say, if 15,000 units, so this would be units, 15,000 would be the units produced, units manufactured, however you want to say that. Units produced 15,000 and 61,800 hours. That would be the actual hours. 61,800, and at an hourly rate of $19.85 per hour, so actual rate 19.85. Oops. So a couple things. We'll do the actual math here in just a second, but you can already tell something without even plugging in the formula. You should kind of just be able to look at this and logic your way through something, and that is that this number 1985 is less than that number, which means I spent less. My actual rate was less than what my standard rate was, which means I can already tell just by looking at this without doing any math at all that I'm going to have a favorable rate variance because my rate is better than what I anticipated. 20 or just 1985 versus 20. I spent 1985 an hour instead of $20 an hour, so I will have a favorable variance. But let's do the actual math on it. So my direct labor rate variance is equals my actual rate minus my standard rate, using it from right here, times my actual hours, which is 9,270. And again, as always, super important to label that this is a favorable variance. I spent based on the rate alone on direct labor, purely on the rate that I paid for direct labor, I spent $9,270 less than what I anticipated. So my direct labor time variance I've got actual hours minus standard hours, but do I have a standard hours here? Okay, this is what I was kind of mentioning earlier. They're not always going to just give you the standard hours, but here's what I do know. I do know how many I manufactured, and I do know how much I should use as a standard per unit. So since I know that I should spend 4 hours per unit and I produced 15,000 units, I can find what my total standard hours should be. So my total standard hours should be 60,000. So yet again, you can tell I spent more hours than what I anticipated, so I'm going to have an unfavorable variance. I can tell again without even doing the math that when my actual hours is higher than my standard hours, and that by definition means that I'm going to have an unfavorable direct labor time variance. But we'll do the math now to see what that dollar amount actually is. So my direct labor time variance is actual hours minus standard hours times my standard rate, which is $36,000, which is $36,000 unfavorable variance. So now I've found both of those. I can now find my total variance by simply adding those two together. And I do want to add, I want the negative to take away from the other one. because what I have is a higher unfavorable variance than I do a favorable variance. So my overall my variance is unfavorable. That's all. We'll stop. That's a little short video, I know, but we'll stop with this one and we'll continue with the next part of the chapter in the next video.